What's going on, fam? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast, episode 37.
Yep,
Moving,
yep.
moving, moving on up.
Let's
Getting
go.
close to getting past my age here. What's going on? Hope you guys are having a fantastic Wednesday. As I always mention, feel free to like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. We tune in every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. Eastern. But I'm really excited because this is the fifth part of the six-part series.
Right.
Where we're going to be talking about today is dispo, or also dispositions. What is dispositions? What does that process look like? We're going to talk a little bit about what our experience has been like. What are some things, if you're starting out, to look out for, and kind of the struggles of it all. We're just going to keep it real. So over the past couple weeks, we've gone through we've really broken down the real estate wholesaling process of like running a business and the different sectors. So we talked about, the first week was administration,
Mm-hmm.
the second week marketing, third was acquisition, last week, or I guess no, lead management, I'm sorry, was the
Right.
third week. Acquisitions was last week. And now we're on the fifth, which is dispositions. So we're going to break that down for you guys. And, feel free to comment, if you have any questions, reach out to us, whatever the case may be. So dispositions is, I say dispositions is harder than
Mm-hmm.
acquisitions, in my opinion, because with acquisitions, there's only so many scenarios. I mean, there's always going to be various scenarios that come up when you're speaking to sellers directly, like, you're solving problems, right? But with dispositions, sometimes if it can feel like it's out of your control, whether it's with the title company, the certain title company you're dealing with, the buyers, and their funding.
Mm-hmm.
um, it can be many things. It can be, title issues that come up, or maybe, some issues with the liens, where you also have to get creative and solve problems as well. So ultimately, with whatever sector you're in, like you're solving problems. But the type of cases or scenarios that come up in dispositions, like, you never know what's going to
Yeah.
happen. It's important to have a process down of, like, this is our process, especially as you hand it off. But you kind of have to really train your disposition. You have to have really strong disposition managers, who kind of know what they're doing. So we'll be talking a little bit about that, kind of what our experience has been like. So I know, Tim, you've done like virtual wholesaling, which is really wholesaling, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing it in your own backyard, and you've also done deals in your own backyard as well. So
Right.
walk me through what your disposition process has been like. What are things to kind of look out for when it comes to that?
Yeah, sure. The I think in the beginning it was a little bit different than it is now, just because you're new and you're not sure exactly what the process is until you kind of gone through it. And I think me finding the buyer, and then the buyer saying yeah they are interested, and then moving on to the next stage by providing them with the information, them going setting the appointment for them to go out there. So this is all a part of the process of disposition, right? And then once they say yes, sending them an assignment agreement, um, and then having them sign that, and then sending that off to the title company or escrow company that you currently have, that you're working with. And then there goes into another stage of, okay, now escrow is started. The most important thing is getting the EMD in so they can start the
Right.
process, right? So um, before, early I had to put in the EMD for the earnest money deposit
Mhm.
for my deals, but now I have relationships with title company and escrow companies where I can wait until the buyer actually puts in the escrow before we start the process. So I'm not using my own money to actually start the escrow process. Uh,
Mhm.
so that you'll build that up because it's a relationship based with the and that's all a part of the disposition. Too is your relationship with your buyer, relationship with the escrow company, title
Mhm.
company. So, and then from there, it's just, you're waiting on your communication with the title or escrow company back and forth,
Mhm.
making sure if you're JVing with somebody, there's another process there to where if you're partnering with someone that brought you the deal or you brought someone the deal and they have the buyer, just making
Right.
sure everybody's in communication, um, and then having the escrow company have all those emails so everybody's kind of CC'd in the right way, and then
Mhm.
making sure the escrow or title company doesn't mess up by sending communication to the buyer, the seller.
Right.
So, anything can happen during that process when it's in the title company. Like you said, liens can come up, taxes, back taxes. So it is maybe a stressful time, exciting but stressful time because you just don't know what's going to happen, and
Right.
something new always does happen or something comes up. But like you said, we have to be problem solvers and find a way
Mhm.
to resolve that issue. If there's no resolve, we'll have to cancel it and then move on. And sometimes you have to do that. So,
Right. Yeah,
um,
not holding on to the deals too long,
right.
which I think a lot of people do. Um, just especially if it's your first deal, you kind of want to hold on to it, but you have to consider like if if really you have to kind of that's where it's like kind of part of your process, right? Like how long do I hold on to the contract? Obviously, in the original agreement where it's like closed within certain number of days, you want to make sure you stay in that. But it's like for how long? Like what is your process?
Hmm.
Okay, a week to do the due diligence, or 2 weeks to do the due diligence, which is like sending buyers to see the property,
Hmm.
taking bids.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and everyone has a different process. And so this is where it's important. Like you'll kind of figure out your flow sort of thing. And what we are talking about too is it's almost a combo because when you're starting out, we're wearing different hats, like some,
Hmm.
what we've talked about. We're sort of talking also like as a transaction coordinator, which is a completely different like section we'll talk about next week, but it kind of bleeds into dispo when you're
Hmm.
starting out because you're kind of the dispo, like once it's under contract, you kind of put on your dispo and your transaction
Hmm.
coordinator hat. But dispo, they're really like the closers, so to speak.
Yep.
Like once they get it locked up, they're then starting a process there.
Hmm.
So it's really important that you have that dialed down or like just kind of figure it as you go. Like Tim said, like he created that relationship with the title company because that's probably one of the hardest thing, which is really important that you're networking with other investors or other wholesalers of asking what are investor friendly title companies, because how many
Hmm.
people have we talked to is like my title company killed my deal, because that will happen if you're not on top of your title. If your title company doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't understand wholesaling or anything like that, like that can kill your deal. So you're having to do more work upfront to have to communicate with that. So you know we're kind of we're gonna kind of go back and forth between transaction coordinator and disposition, but disposition is really people who are the closers. So we talked about
Hmm.
like acquisitions is sort of getting understanding the leads. If they're able to close, they can, but they're sort of like the setters of acquiring these leads, and then they're sort of passing it off, and then the dispo person sort of understands from there, like, okay, I have it under contract. This is going to be the process.
Hmm.
Work with the transaction coordinator to who really works with the title company. But when you're on your own, you're sort of doing all of these things at once. So,
Right.
um, there's a lot that goes into it with these things. So, it's important to sort of understand what that process is. Start, working on that, and then you can kind of create your own sort of flow.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, early when you're doing the process, you're still don't have a lot of buyers, and you're still kind of shopping it around a little bit, and you're doing the traditional things like Facebook groups, or just kind of you're doing the prop stream hack with finding
Mhm.
cash buyers. So I think
Mhm.
that whole process is when you hone it down a little bit and have, one to probably five buyers that you can go to consistently, and know exactly what they're looking for, the process gets a little bit easier as well,
Right.
especially in the markets that you're working. And
Right.
and you don't have to ask for proof of funds all the time and all of that. So it just gets into a easier process and quicker process for you to close.
Right. And the disposition person, really their responsibility is to talk to as many buyers, is creating those relationships with the buyers. So sometimes people hire VAs to talk
Mhm.
to buyers, but sometimes that can be a pro and con, and sometimes language barriers. So maybe you want somebody who's really strong in English to call these cash buyers. Because again, ultimately, it's about relationships, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it's with the title companies or real estate attorneys or buyers, cash buyers, hedge funds, whatever. You want to create these relationships because you want to find a way to stand out where it's like, hey, if I send you a deal, you guys will have that relationship built, set in place. So
Mhm.
it's that's where it's like you want to create a process of like, I know people who call cash buyers every day, right? Or like
Mhm.
spend an hour cold calling cash buyers, pull a list from listors, like how you were mentioning, Tim. This is my list of cash buyers. I'm just going to go through and call and see if they're buying and
Mhm.
take notes of their criteria. So it's completely opposite of acquisitions or like the marketing side where you're marketing to sellers. The dispo, in a way, they're also like part of their job is also marketing to buyers and being like,
Right.
hey, we're investors. We run across a ton of properties. We're just looking to create relationships, and you'll either you can find not only cash buyers but maybe lenders. Maybe they're also
Mhm.
lenders. Maybe they're contractors. Like you name it. So now you've kind of built a VIP list and understand what these buyers are looking for. So when you do have a
Mhm.
deal, you can just be like, hey, this fits your criteria. Are you interested? So reverse engineering that is really important in the disposition process that I think people don't really focus on. And it wasn't something I focused on in the beginning. I was just solely like just acquisitions because I was like, well, let me get a deal and then I can figure it out.
Mhm.
But the same process is too, like with agents, right? Like
Yeah.
dispo person can also call brokers, agents. Again, it's all like relationship based at this point. So something
Yeah.
really, really important that I don't think people probably do that enough because I know I didn't do it as much as I'm doing it that now.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think at first you're just excited about the deal, and then you're just trying to go through that process, and then later you're like, okay, there has to be an easier way. In having a pool of buyers is going to
Right.
be your easiest way to do that. So you actively have to find these buyers or communicate and network with these buyers to make sure that you're providing them with quality deals that
Right.
they're actually looking for.
Right. Exactly. So, um, again, the dispo consists of many things. Like,
Hmm.
it's also how you structure deals because sometimes, as you become more experienced and maybe have some funds, have closed some deals, you may get under contract, go and take a look at the property and be like, "Oh, it's not as bad as I originally thought. Maybe I should wholesale this, or maybe
Hmm.
I want to keep this." So you may want to structure the deal a little bit differently. Maybe originally you were considering as a wholesale deal. And how many people run into this where they're like, have a decision to make. I can make 20 grand, a quick 20 grand as a wholesale deal, or I could keep it and make this much. So that's where you can kind of structure it. And as you learn more, you kind of have these opportunities to um, have these decisions. Obviously, when you're starting out, like you just want to wholesale it right away, unless it's like a super grand opportunity and you kind of already know some information. But um, this is the important part of like having a strong dispositions manager that understands your business model as well, of like and seeing the signs of like, oh, actually, I'm still going through the process. I'm still marketing to buyers, marketing this deal to buyers. But now that I take a look at it, actually, I think I want to keep it, or I want to wholesale it. And we could
Mhm.
maybe do another segment on what wholesaling is, because
Sure.
not many people understand what that is. And I think in this market, I think more people are doing that. So as you get more knowledge, and obviously the more you expose yourself, the more knowledge you'll gain, you'll start understanding these as deals come across and knowing what a good deal is.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, that's why I love the real estate, because as you get into these deals, there's more options for you to kind of, have a strategy on what direction you're gonna go on a close of a property, right? And
Right.
at first, when you're starting out, it's just one goal is just to wholesale, but as you get more experience and get into more deals, then I think you have more options, and you learn that process along the way, and and then restructuring the deal to make sure that it fits your strategy going forward for that particular property.
Right. Exactly. So with the dispositions on the acquisition side, or even sometimes dispositions if they need to close a deal, but usually they're like I said, they're managing the buyer side. You have an assignment agreement, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The purchase and sale agreement is that initial agreement between you and the seller, and then you have the assignment agreement, which is
Mhm.
you literally assigning that purchase agreement with the seller to the buyer for a higher price than what you got it under contract for. That's what an assignment agreement is. If anybody needs a copy, again, I think we in a couple episodes or a couple weeks ago we talked about some resources. I think Kong is one of them. Flip with Rick.
Mhm. Yep.
Even Pace Morby has some assignment agreements. Of course, you want to review it with an attorney to make sure everything's good, but usually they have all the clauses and everything. So they're the ones sending the agreement once it's like, because again, it's all about a process, right? You want to think about your process, especially if you're doing it virtually. Who's your boots on the ground? Who's going to go see the appointment? Who's going to go manage the appointment if it's not you because you live maybe across the country?
Sure.
You need somebody trustworthy, so you need to build in a process. So once you find somebody, boots on the ground, and people have talked about, it doesn't have to be somebody you hire. It can be a real estate agent who does it. It could be
Mhm.
from what I heard as well, is like locksmiths,
Mhm.
anybody who's like just is constantly surrounded by like houses, or is always visiting houses. You can pay these people and be like, hey, just be discreet. Because this is where it can be tricky, where buyers like run into each other, or maybe they run into the seller. They're not supposed to talk. You have to set
Mhm.
guidelines and rules. So you're like, hey, here's an appointment window from this day to this day. You have, until this day to, give me your price. These are all like moving pieces of part of the dispo process once you get it under contract with the seller, and then start that process. And some people, it depends on what their process is. Some people like to put in the EMD and
Mhm.
the agreements that with the seller with the title company or real estate attorney first, just to start the title process, so that when the title company is the title is ready to go, they already have a buyer and they just send over the assignment. But my process is more, I like to have both documents first,
Mhm.
before I send it in, because I'm like, okay, if I'm marketing for a week or two, I'm just gonna package it to the title company to make it a super streamlined process. Um, but it really varies. I think maybe you do the same, Tim. I'm not sure if you usually
Mhm.
in the past have give that to the title company first.
Yeah, in the past, I've given, like, the purchase agreement first, and then, I even gave them EMD and all of that,
Yeah, same.
before and then now my process is similar to yours, where I have all the pieces together, and then I have the buyer actually lined up to, send the EMD on a certain time frame, because that's laid out in the assignment agreement as well too.
Right.
Even though we're assigning that purchase agreement, I just reiterate that into the assignment agreement as well. So there's no loss in communication on when the EMD is supposed to be due to the title
Right.
company.
Yeah, and it's really important too that you get a deposit from the buyer, um, a separate deposit that doesn't include the EMD. Or sometimes the way I've done it, it's like, okay, I'm asking 10 grand from the buyer as a deposit on the deal, but maybe 500 of it goes towards the EMD. So that's
Mhm.
usually how I've done it too. Instead of them doing two separate, they just kind of, because it's all in one clean process.
Right.
Um, but it's really important in your assignment agreement. It's not valid. And this usually, if you have a pretty good assignment agreement, that's listed there that this assignment is not valid until one, it's signed from both you and the buyer, and two, that the actual deposit that's in the assignment agreement is given to the title company. I've had situations too where the buyer signed it, but they ghosted. Like they never
Mm.
funded the title company. They just signed it and then just left it like that because they also knew, hey, it's not valid unless I give a
Mhm.
deposit. So I'm not, but with that, you want to set a guideline where it's like, okay, if they're ghosting me, if I'm not hearing from them for a day, then I need to move on. Cause again, time kills deals.
Yep.
So it's all about speed in real estate because you don't want to, keep the seller waiting or the title company like asking questions. You want to keep things moving. So it's really important that you understand those things and that there's also a timeline in the agreement that's like if this isn't um you have one business day to deposit
Mhm.
to sign this and to deposit um the amount to the title company real estate attorney. So these are important things because you don't want it buyers, they run across a ton of deals. So you really have to stand your ground and be really um strong in like how you set up your process with that because they'll just take advantage of you if needed. So that's something really important that I think some people have been gypped. Like I've known so many people that how buyers view, and this is another part of the dispose process that is also like buyers not liking how much you're making,
Mhm.
or I had a deal where the buyer ran out of funds and that's why they didn't put in the deposit, but they signed, or you name it. There's all these little like scenarios that you have to deal with that's just like unnecessary, but it's
Mhm.
going to happen. No deal is like perfect.
Yeah. No. I mean, some of the things you can do to kinda save you, um, some, headache is not allowing a non-refundable EMD. So
Right.
that means that if they don't execute in a certain amount of time, then you get to keep the EMD. So you're not at a total loss, but you can kind of keep on moving from there because the title company will probably refund it back to you. So instead of the seller, because that's what it says in an assignment agreement, not the
Hmm.
contract, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so you just got to make sure that the language is correct in there, and just always advise. My advice is always, you know, check with your attorney and make sure they look at it and have the right verbiage for that.
Right.
But I think when the EMD can be worked out no matter what, but also like proof of funds is very important to make sure you you might be excited about the buyer, but you forgot to ask for proof of funds. I've done it before,
Hmm.
but luckily I didn't get burned on it. But proof of funds is very important when you're interviewing that buyer and making sure that buyer has the right funds for that particular property as well.
Yeah, that's huge, and that is also part of the dispo process as well. So this is where like we may be kind of dancing
Yeah,
around like
yeah,
different.
we are, yeah.
But like I mean, either way, like if we kind of like you have it under contract with the seller to well, this is where it's interesting because you pass it on maybe to, if you have a full team, the transaction coordinator to communicate with the seller and the title company, right? Like that's
Mhm.
usually, and we'll talk about that next week. But then the dispo person starts their own process of like, okay, I'm gonna start marketing to buyers. This is my VIP list. What I know I've vetted myself, going through what we talked about of like asking for proof of funds. Maybe you've done a few deals together, so you know they can close. That's the kind of your VIP list. So
Mhm.
you're doing a mass email to them. Maybe like depending on their responses, you'll kind of coordinate, like see from there. But you're also setting up a time. You're like, okay, we need to set up a time to go see the property. Um, these are the specific buyers I have. So I'm going to, move forward with that. And then depending on that, it can be many things. So there's also other scenarios where you want to start the process too. Is that comes up is also doing like a memorandum, right? Which is like
Mhm.
you going to is it the county or something to like say like, hey, I am the sole buyer to, or have this under contract.
Right.
Because what happens, and this happens to a lot of new people, if it's a really good deal or if it's a good property that maybe other people have been following up on, um, people may have it under contract, but they never set a memorandum. And so somebody else does. And so they
Mm.
have the right to wholesale it or buy it from them. And then you take it to the title company because maybe the seller decided to go with you or whatever. And then it turns out like, no, there's a memorandum filed on this property. You cannot buy it
Yep.
or you cannot, do
Yep.
anything with it. So this is where I mean, like in dispo, there's all these scenarios that come up. It hasn't happened to me quite yet, knock on wood.
Right, right,
But
right.
this is where you want to having your process down is super, super key. If you know this is like a really good deal. But I kind of sidetracked there, but those are things that can happen like throughout the dispo process. But once you have a buyer, you set a deadline. Okay, buyers, you have until Friday at 5 p.m. to give me all your offers. Once that's set and you pick the best offer, and sometimes you want to go with the highest offer, but again, it also depends on like the relationship. If it's a newer buyer that offered you a little bit more, you have to also vet the process, because I never go in. I've learned not to go in like money motivated, like,
Yeah,
oh,
you
they're
can't.
offering me more, but I don't really know this person. I've worked with this person, so I know I can count on them. Sometimes it's like just go with what you know.
Mhm.
And sometimes if it's a hot enough deal, like where you have various bids, you can negotiate with buyers too. Like you have, like that's the thing as a wholesaler, you have the control. Sometimes
Yep.
wholesalers, especially new, they don't think like they have that control. And it's like, no, you can negotiate with buyers. It's easy for them. They're throwing out their best price, but doesn't mean you
Mhm.
can't come back with a price, especially if it's a hot deal.
Right.
So once you get a price down, you send the assignment agreement, you ask for the non-refundable deposit, you package that over to the title company. Title company starts the title search, and then it's like, okay, on to the next deal. That's the whole premise of this, on to the next deal,
Right.
because you have to, and that's how you really systemize it. But during that process, the title process, issues can come up, title issues or seller this or buyer that. So that's where having a transaction coordinator is really helpful, which we'll talk about next week, because that's their sole purpose, is solving those problems. So
Yep.
that, but when we're on our own, we're dispositions, and we have to transition to transaction coordinator to solve the problems with the title company and then go back. So it can be really distracting. You guys can kind of see how it can be really conflicting, where it's like, hey, I want to move on to the next deal or focus on my acquisitions, but I have to, prioritize these follow-ups. So it can be really stressful. So this is why like kind of delegating things so you can focus on what's most important is the best thing. So that's sort of like the process of what you're setting up. You're getting that assignment agreement and moving on, and getting paid and moving on to the next one. It's just a repetitive process. It's not very
Mhm.
complicated. Everyone
Nope.
will have their own, but it's just figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah, and I think my advice is just to, uh, you know, actively look for buyers all the time. And, I know we didn't do that when we first started, but I mean, even if you don't have a deal, still actively look for buyers just
Right.
because, you're in that market, you're going to lock up a deal and you need to find out what's their buy box or what their criteria is for, purchasing uh, property in that area, whether it's
Right.
just land or whether it's a, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, what condition, what the year is, all those that information is important to each
Right.
buyer. So just
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and I think people always say like, "Why talk to buyers if you don't have a deal?" I mean, if you have a deal, it's great,
yeah,
but it doesn't hurt to just reach out and be like, "Hey, I'm a new investor," or maybe just say, "Hey, I'm an investor, and I run across a ton of properties that sometimes don't fit my criteria. Like, I'm happy to pass it over to you, and just have a conversation. Not everyone's going to be nice or welcoming. Some people would be like, "No, I'm not buying right now," or whatnot. But that should be a
mhm,
consistent thing that you're doing in your business. Something I just started doing as well on a weekly basis is I'm reaching out to brokers or agents, or any sort of investors to see. And sometimes too, while you're talking to sellers, they're going to be like, "I'm buying right now. Add me to your buyers list." So
right,
don't think that you can only the dispositions or calling buyers directly will get you buyers. Like sometimes the sellers are buyers themselves. And I know many people who've closed plenty of deals with original sellers who said they were
yeah,
buyers. So
yep,
don't ever think somebody who says no, I'm not interested, like, ask that follow-up question of, well, do you have other properties? And usually they'll be like, no, I have other properties, but I'm not interested, but I am looking to buy. These savvy buyers will kind of know what to look out for. They usually know wholesalers. So always keep your eyes and ears open because you never know who you're going to speak with next. So, um, yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell of 30 minutes. That's kind of
I
the
know, right?
disposition process. I think, yeah, Tim, you dropped tons of gems on just putting yourself out there, of like consistently thinking of like reaching out to sellers, not just or reaching out to buyers, not just
Mhm.
focusing on the seller side. And then once you close some deals, you can start like delegating to that, to those respective roles. But this has been fun. Just kind of breaking that down. Next week we will be talking about transaction coordination, or coordinator, I should say, which again it kind of bleeds in between dispo and with Dispo as well, as we talked about, like they work very closely together, because
Mhm.
it's on the tail end of a deal. They're the ones communicating with the title company, so that should be really great. We hope you got a lot out of it. Tim, anything before we head out?
No, I think the series is winding down, but I think, there's just if you haven't watched the previous, podcasts or listened to other podcasts in this series, I would definitely go back and, start from the beginning and then, just catch up with us because, there's more gems to be had, going
Yeah,
forward in our last series coming up. So,
yeah, next
I'm
week.
excited. Yep.
I know. I was like 6 weeks we've been going down. And what's really great, what I'm hoping you guys get out of this is, if you guys ever run into a question or whatever about acquisitions or lead management, you guys can go to that specific episode where we talk about that respective topic or section or department, I should really say. And you guys can like learn about that, or hey, I'm stuck in this, let me go check out the acquisitions. So that was a whole purpose of creating this. So hope you guys get a lot out of it. Don't forget to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Um, our Get the Bag podcast Instagram is get_the_bag podcast. Reach out to us there. But really hope you guys got a ton out of this. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and tune in next week. We'll be finishing up the last part of our series, which is transactions or transaction coordinator. Don't want to miss that. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.